Hey everyone, welcome to the Black Podcast. I'm so excited about today, of course, and I say that every week, but I'm really excited because we have a Delta in the building. But before we talk about that, um, I am one of your hosts here on the Black Podcast. And for many of you, been watching and sharing for a very long time. So we're just excited about your continuous support with the Black Podcast. I am a student athlete resilience coach. I'm an athletic program enthusiast, and I really have a lot of experience not only in just coaching, but helping other coaches to create a 90% matriculation within their program. And what I've noticed throughout my study and my experience is that a lot of our young Black males, they get involved in athletics for many different reasons, whether it's financial reasons, whether it's to get out of their situation. And I feel like the system, the educational system, as far as athletics, don't always benefit our young Black males as far as long term. And so that's what I do. I like to create a space where our athletes are being productive, not only in our community, but just in life, understanding who they are and what they're doing. And so through that, I have been blessed with a partner, Mr. Streak here, who has an extensive background in what the system does. And so it's just been a blessing to partner up with him and create our organization called HSBA, which is the umbrella of the Black Podcast. So we want to welcome you and thank you for continuing to support us here on the Black Podcast.
Yes, and we come back here every Thursday, and it's just always a pleasure. It really doesn't matter who the guest is. There's some type of value that the guest is bringing that we know is needed across the community, but also we know it's needed to be heard from outside of the community to bring about a better understanding of who we are and understanding that we are not all the same, but also that we have greatness across the spectrum. I was working in Miami, Florida as a foster parent support specialist back in 2013 and 2015. And while working there, I saw these teenagers that nobody wanted to bring them in their home. Nobody wanted to foster them. So they would go through the group homes. And I started to hear these stories because they would come out and work out with us. I used to run a boot camp, a calisthenic type boot camp after hours. They come out and work out with us. And I started hearing these stories. Such and such aged out last year, and now we're about to go to her funeral. Such and such aged out, a couple months ago, and now she has a child that's in the system. I started to hear just this perpetuation of negativity, just cycling back and forth throughout the whole child welfare space. And I love what I did. I trained foster parents. I got their license, got their homes licensed, made sure that they properly maintain their kids in their homes. And I saw an issue of these kids not being able to have the proper skills necessary when going into adulthood. So that's when I decided to come back to Mississippi. And a lot of people tell me I'm crazy. You left Miami, Florida, to come back to Mississippi. But I did it because I had a mission. So I came back and I got highly active across the community, across the state, became a speaker, started speaking at universities, grade school, K through 12, community organizations all over the place, the Youth Detention Center. And eventually I started my own business because I no longer wanted the issue, the reason behind these kids not having the proper services to be funding. So I started my own business. Your Legacy Begins Now, where I umbrella numerous different companies that I'm partnered with that I help run various different products and services through to be a portion of the funding mechanism to go towards developing and sustaining these mentoring programs. And now I have partnered with Dr. Sherelle Hobson, and we have our own that is launching soon across Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, and then before you know it, across the nation. And we need people that we interact with on these podcasts on a weekly basis to be a part of our mission because, how they say it takes a village. Well, when it comes to our next generation, it takes a village of us. So without further ado, we have with us today Miss Rachel Lauren.
Yes,
Hi.
I'm excited.
Thanks, Aurora.
You're welcome. We're so excited about you being a part of the Black Podcast. Initially when I saw your page, I just thought, oh, she's a Delta, okay. And then it was just levels and layers and layers and layers of the things that you're doing. And I was like, she's amazing. So we need to have her on here. And so I'm just excited that you accept the invite. And I had to warn him. I told Mr. Streak, she's a Delta, so you can barely handle me. So I don't know what you're gonna do when two of us in the building, but he's gonna do his best to hang in there. But we definitely want the audience to know more about you. We see all the pretty faces and pictures and all the glamorous things that you're doing, but you have so much um, substance to yourself that the world needs, and we need to know more about you and what you're doing. But we like to start off with a story, who you are, where you're born, and like the dynamics of your family. And so that we can have a better understanding moving forward of who you are. So if you can give us some insight on that, it'd be great.
Sure. Well, first, thank you for having me. And you know that the party isn't live until the Deltas arrive. So I think he'll be okay today. So like you said, my name is Rachel Lauren. I'm originally from Chicago, Illinois. I currently live in Austin, Texas. I've been here for about 4 years now. I'm an activist. I'm an advocate. I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion professional. I'm also an adoptive mother of 3 beautiful children, former foster mother, and I do advocate in that space as well. Proud to be Black and always advocating for that also. And, coming from Chicago, I was able to see a lot of systemic issues. And I think that is where a lot of my passion comes from, is growing up in a city where I was able to see that firsthand. And in addition, my mother is Puerto Rican. So understanding the dynamics of race and ethnicity, what it means to be Afro-Latina, all of that really played a role into what led me to DEI work as well.
When you start looking at the dynamics of your family, talk about like your experience, like while you were in grade school, moving up to high school. Like, what was that experience like for you? Was there anything, like, did you know at that time? Like, I know you said you noticed that there was a challenge, or and it was like you knew it was there, but did you really know to what extent that it was for you? Was it something that you experienced personally? Was it just something that you saw within your surroundings? Like, what was that experience like for you, like in high school or grade school?
So I'll say, I grew up in a predominantly Black area. And so because of that, I don't think I realized what the disparities were, what kind of some of the disadvantages that our community faces were until I got older. I went to college at University of Illinois, which is a white institution. And so I think a lot of things became apparent to me really then. And even now as an adult, when I look back on certain experiences, I realize that I was in certain situations that were problematic that I didn't know. An example would be, I was in high school. I had a history teacher that was a white male, and he believed in doing reenactments to try to teach us how, to learn about history, the things that happened in the past. And we loved him, right? We thought that he was just this great person and great teacher. But he did a reenactment of slavery. And he actually tied us together as students. Mind you, we're like 95% Black. There might have been like one white kid in the class. Tied us together, blindfolded us, put on, like, in the background, sounds of water as if we were on a ship. And then at one point chased us around the school, and he was the master and we were the slaves. Now, as crazy as that sounds, right? Like, if my kids were in that situation, the school probably wouldn't exist anymore because I'm that type of mama. But as crazy as that sounds, back then, we didn't know. We literally didn't know. And it took me growing up and thinking back on that situation, like, wait a minute, that was not okay, to realize that was not at all okay. No. And it got me thinking about all of the things that happen in schools that our children might not know to tell us because they're not aware of what is acceptable and what isn't, right? So.
Wow. And I can imagine, like, I mean, when you think back, like, even just me listening to that story, it's like traumatic. It's like, I let somebody put a rope around me, you just think like, oh my gosh. But I can't even imagine, like you said, you thinking back on that. It's like, where's that teacher at? And maybe his intentions weren't, to be whatever. But the reality is, it is what it is, and that's definitely like out of line. What was your conversation like with your family in that space? Like when you were these type of conversations like taking place at your house? Was it the conversations you had with your friends? Like, what were those conversations like for you? Or were you just guys just out, just living life thinking that this is just what it is? Was there ever any kind of conversation on like, hey, I feel a certain way? Or, did you, I guess I'm just trying to figure out, like, at what point did you feel like, okay, a conversation needs to be said? Because a lot of our kids, I mean, now they're a little more up on right and wrong. So they're okay with saying, like, I feel uncomfortable, or this situation seems wrong or racist, or they're a little more educated on things that are going on versus back then where you just didn't know. As an adult, you figured that they have good intentions and you just went with the flow. But what was that conversation like in the house, like for you?
So with that situation specifically, it wasn't even something that I went home and told, which is why it angers me. It's almost embarrassing, right? To have gone through that and to not even recognize that there was a problem. There was a teacher that I loved that was a Black teacher that saw what was happening in the hallway and stopped it. And that particular teacher got in trouble. The board got involved. It was a whole thing, but complete oblivion for myself and my friends. Like, we didn't go home and tell, like, it was not something that we made a big deal. And now I'm like, I don't know how that could happen. I think that there's this idea, of overt racism, and then there's covert racism. And I think that growing up in my house, I was taught about covert. I was taught about people that are blatant, that,
Tell the audience the difference between the two.
Okay, so racism that is obvious, right? So people calling you certain slurs, profiling you in situations maybe with the police. That's pretty covert. But overt would be like some of those passive aggressive things that people say, or like gradual leading into racism. So that teacher, to me, bought our trust by bringing certain other experiences and making learning fun. And so we trusted him. And so the way that, to me, that racist experience happened, it was kind of covert because you got us to a point where we didn't think that he would be someone that would do that. And so I say all that to say, conversations in my house about racism, they happened. A lot of people are surprised when I tell them my father was the first Black captain for the state of Illinois police. And here I am advocating for defunding, right? But my father taught me that because he was a Black man first, that racism existed even in his line of work and toward him. So I was very aware of those, inner workings and things like that, but I don't think I was as aware of the covert things at the time.
Now, that's something that's back when we were younger, like you said, a lot of times we're oblivious of it. And like Sherelle just mentioned, in current times, especially with the influence of social media, younger kids are being exposed to these things at a much younger age. So they're being able to speak up on it. So just looking at where you were then, and when you got to where you started to really take notice to, okay, that actually happened. Like, that actually happened. They actually were doing that overtly. Looking at the fact that you do, as it pertains to your ethnicity, you are part of multiple cultures. Has there been any like backlash from certain parts of your ethnicity that's like, well, you don't go that hard for XXX issue, but you over here going so hard for XXX? My children are biracial. My ex-wife was a Latina. So there would be certain things that happen in our community that to a certain extent she couldn't relate to. But on the flip side, there were things that were happening in her country I couldn't really relate to. So it was always a very interesting dynamic when we came together as two ethnicities. So just in that specific dynamic, has there been like a pull from one way to the other when it comes to your advocacy inside you?
There hasn't been a pull, and I say this often, I am bi-ethnic, I'm not biracial. And so what I mean by that is I am a Black woman. My mother identifies as Afro-Latina. Racially, she identifies as Black. And so that is what I identify with and what I fight for. Ethnically, yes, I'm proud that my mother is Puerto Rican and I represent that culture, and that is important to me. And if there were ever anything going on ethnically with, that island or my family, of course, it's something that would be important as well. But racially, I'm Black. And so I think, when it comes to what I'm going to talk about, what I'm fighting for, it's always that first.
Got it. And that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because you can look at the ethnic, you can look at profession, you can look at, like you just mentioned with your dad. I don't care what profession you're in or what ethnicity you are, you can take it to the Asians, you can take it to, whatever other ethnicity. That police ain't gonna ask your ethnicity. They're gonna see what you look like, and that's the race that they're going to place on you. I say police, that's what's in the, the news right now. But anyone that has any type of power over you, they're gonna see that race first. And a lot of times when it comes to diversity, inclusion, lots of people that aren't in the Black community can easily overlook, but you're this, but you're that, but you're part of this. No, like they don't see all of those other things. They see what they see. You see those other things because you know me. So, have you, when it comes to diversity work, can you go into like some of the specifics as far as your work in diversity? Because I know a lot of times people hear diversity and it can be very convoluted. And, there's diversity when it comes to race. There's diversity when it comes to the various different ableism, various different types of, various different spaces. So can you kind of speak to that, some of the specific areas that you have been working in recently as it pertains to diversity?
Yeah. So to start, I lead DEI for a company here in Texas. It's a tech organization called Favor Delivery. It's owned by HEB, which is the largest employer in the state. And then in addition to that, I'm one of 3 Black women that own a consulting firm, Diversified. And a lot of the clients that we work with tend to be in the nonprofit space. So an example of that would be Van Jones' organization, Dream Corps. We lead DEI for them. Some of the things that we bring to the space, you already mentioned different levels of what diversity actually means. So race is usually the first thing that people think about, as they should. It's the foundation for the work. It's the foundation for the conversation. We can't address that elephant in the room. We can't get to everything else. It's the one thing that is an outlier. So for example, if there is a member of the queer community that is white and a member of the queer community that is Black, race is going to be the thing that separates between the two of them, right? And it's going to be the thing that affects them on a systemic level. Some things that we do when we come into organizations is we do leadership coaching. We have programming and training that can center around all kinds of different topics, from queer community and pronoun training to unconscious bias, to identity, all different types of programs and training. And then we do a lot of policy and procedure, basically analyzing and rectifying sometimes. So it just depends on the organization and the needs of the organization. We usually start with a survey where we kind of assess what the needs are, and then we build a roadmap off of that.
I love it.
Wow. When I look at like some of the work that you're doing, I know a lot of it may be, a lot of corporate companies are starting to become a little more aware, I guess, because the amount of different, variety of employees they have. So they're starting, whether they're doing it because they believe in it or they're just doing it because they have to check a box. You do see it a lot more in corporate America. But it just bothers me, like within the educational system, it's still one of those topics that we try to stay away from. It's like, don't talk about race, just don't talk about that. Like everything is just, don't talk about that. And so it's kind of mind bothering when it's like, this should be the space that we are educating, our students on, real life about diversity and what it means, what inclusion means. Nowadays they have separated, when they talk about inclusion now within school, it's always either your students who are disadvantaged or, economically disadvantaged, including them. So if you're allowed, you have to have a certain percentage within the school, right? So the school can get money if you have a couple of those inner city kids that come, right? To them, that's inclusion, right? Then you have your special education, group, and so they're at the school, so that's inclusion. And then you have we have a space for our, I think it's LBGTBs. I don't even know. I don't know, whatever it is. So
LGBTQIA plus.
Yes. Thank you. So they have that also in schools now, but you don't have anything for, the Black students, like any kind of safe space for them. And so I've asked a couple of guests on the show, the last couple of guests that we've had, like, why do you feel, or do you feel, or why are we more comfortable with those areas of inclusion than we are with when we focus on a certain race, as far as like your Black and brown, young men and women? Where is the support, like, in the system with that? Like, do you feel like the schools are there yet, or is that still a topic that they try to stay away from when it comes to your line of work?
I wouldn't say that they're there. I'll say that I think it depends by district, by school. I don't think that you can even make a general statement, right, about the school systems all over the country. I've seen some that are doing really well and making great improvements, and I've seen others that have a really long way to go. As far as why it is, I think it just goes back to supremacy and privilege. Our society is built on supremacy and privilege. And because of that, people are comfortable talking about certain things and using their own privilege to make those things important. And until we're able to actually talk about race and talk about what that societal construct that wasn't created by those that are affected the most, until we're able to talk about that and then identify privilege in the areas that it's showing up in our schools and in our organizations, we can't get to inclusivity. It can't happen.
Wow. And that's one thing that one of our guests had said, probably 2 shows ago. She was saying that she believed that people are more, within the educational system, more open or comfortable with speaking on the LGBT plus, I don't know if I'm saying that right, because most of those who lead those organizations are, white men or white women. And so they're more open to something that they're comfortable with, doing. And so I said, so it's exactly what you're saying. It's still very controlled. So it's not really a topic where it's like, oh, we're getting there, we're getting closer. It's like, no, we're still, we're still not there. Because not only the Black students feel it, the Black teachers feel it. I think we're starting to feel it more, the more that kids are becoming more vocal with how they feel, because of their dynamics of their family. So even being an educator and having students call you the N-word, and have students call you, I've been called a monkey, I look like a monkey, I smell like a monkey. And when those things are expressed to my hierarchy, it's like, they don't know, but they never really address, how do you think I feel, and then to keep the kids in your class, you know what I'm saying? So it's not like they make adjustments to make sure, like, hey, this is unacceptable. And so it's just a really weird space, when you talk about education, because it's like, this is supposed to be a safe place for everybody. And it still feels like it's only a safe place for some, anytime the issues are concerning certain groups, then it's a problem. But then you have that same issue addressing to your other group, and it's like, well, you guys, you're okay, you're strong, you should be able to handle it. And a lot of times we have that stigma of the strong Black woman, the strong Black male. So it's like, we're not supposed to, if you bring anything, if you address any kind of issues, or you bring something, a concern, it looks like you're complaining. It's called complaining. You're not a team player. And so the issues that others may talk about, it's like, well, let's address those issues. So it's just always that different, verbiage of what's acceptable and what's not. So I know that you said that you are an adoptive, adopted 3 children, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that experience, because you don't really you hear about it a little bit, but not so much anymore. It used to be a big deal, or people would keep it as a secret or whatever. What was that journey like for you? Was it, when you decided that you wanted to adopt? Talk about that transition before you did it and then while you're in it.
Yeah. Well, it was a roller coaster. Definitely worth it. My babies are everything to me, and it was worth the journey. But with every foster placement that I had, it was a different story. There was a different situation with the family. Obviously 4 of the children that I fostered went back and were rejoined with their family. And then I had 3 that are now my children. So each time it was different. With my son was actually born in prison, which also is a part of why I'm involved in a lot of social justice and prison reform work. And there were a lot of difficulties with that, because he was placed in our home and we were told that he was open for adoption, that everything was finalized, and that wasn't the case. And so what ended up happening was that it was fine. His parents' rights were terminated the week that he was placed with us, and there was contesting that happened, and there was a process that happened that we weren't prepared for, because we thought, okay, he's coming into our home and this is done. So there was a fight that had to happen that really was nothing but time, because there was nothing that could be done when you're in prison. There's no rights that you can have until you're out, and you're not going to be out for a while. So there was a thing with that. It was very emotional. And then with my daughters, it was like, literally got an email, thought that I was done fostering, thought that I was done adopting, got an email, opened it, saw them, knew they were my children. Instantly, tears, like I knew. And a week later, they were placed in my home. And 6 months later, they were adopted. It was easy peasy, simple. They showed up at my door and my oldest said, "Hi, mommy." Like it was that simple. And then, I had a foster son that went back that was with us actually the longest time in terms of the foster children we had. And he became our godson. And he had gone back with his mother, been with his mother for about 1.5 years. And I just got a call that she is back in prison. So the emotions that I have attached to that situation, you know what I mean? I'm still working through that. It's going to be a forever thing. So
what made you get into the space of, because I know I've had people, I'll be 40 soon. And so, it was always that I always knew I wanted to be a mother, and I still do. And so a lot of times, as I started getting older, people would say, well, you can always adopt, or you can always, and it's like, that's, that wasn't like part of the plan that I have right now. So what is that journey like? Like, what was that experience like as a woman for you to decide, hey, I would rather do this than to have my own, or whatever? Like, how was that journey for you? Like, talk about, I guess, like how you came about knowing that you belong in this space that you're in.
Well, I'll start by saying I have a best friend who is adopted. And we went to high school together, and we've been friends for a while. She's actually, if you watch Real Housewives of Atlanta, Drew Sidora is her sister. And she's the baby of the family. And if you met the family, you would never even know. But she would tell me stories, and I saw just how beautiful her life was. And she told me stories that she remembered from before she was adopted, so when she became adopted. And ever since I met her, I knew that it was something that I wanted to do. I thought that I would carry, and then I would have, a chance to adopt maybe one child, but it just didn't work out that way. I was married. I'm divorced now. My ex-husband is a dear friend of mine and is a great co-parent, still a parent for our 3 children. But it really pulled at my heartstrings when I started to research foster care and adoption. And I started to learn just like how many kids are in the system. Right now, there are 424,000 children in the system nationally. So it's like, yeah, I could carry, but I also could give a home to some kids that really need it. And so when we talk about impacting our community, when we talk about Black Lives Mattering, when we talk about all these different things, like that was something that was a driver for me. If I could adopt 20 children, I probably would. I have to tell myself, no, 3 is enough. Right. But it is just, it's needed. And what I found out too was that there's this misconception that there are more Black children in the system, but what I found out is there are more Black children that are left in the system, not that enter, which tells me that there are other ethnicities and races that are adopting their children, and we're not.
Yeah. And you see that a lot. Like, that was always something that I can't say bothers me. I think we have another guest coming up later on. But I would always think, like, why are so many white people adopting these Black kids? And it's still something that I try to figure out, like, is it a way of, like, this is our way of contributing to the Black community? Is it, look, I'm saving another one? Or is it just, they just fell in love with that child? I don't know, because I believe you have to have a special place. But like you say, and now that you put it in that perspective of, if you're truly trying to be productive in the Black community, that's a good start, because now that child is not going to contribute to the system. A lot of them that get left in there, I don't know how the system works, but I'm sure at a certain age, they probably have to leave, and if it's time for them to go, it's almost like, where do they go? If they never had any kind of structure or family or guidance or anything, it's like, now we're just contributing to the same problem that we're all screaming about is an issue. And so now that you put it in that space, it really helps even my own personal thinking of, are you really an advocate? If you're not willing to make that type of sacrifice or that type of commitment to your community of bringing one in, because for every person that you inspire, I may go inspire a girlfriend, and then now that's less men or less young boys or girls in the system if we all contribute or find a way that we can help, because people get involved in relationships and have stepkids all the time. So, it's like, it's almost the same, a blended family. Finding a way to contribute is, like you said, finding a child. And there's always a stigma of, like, oh, those kids are bad, or, oh, those kids are, and so what is that, like, that process like? Because I know that most of the time that's what people think. They have a negative outlook on, like, most foster kids have too many issues or have too many this or have too many that. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, first I want to say I did do a video today that's on my Instagram that gives 5 different tips for people that want to assist with foster care and adoption. And there's ways that you can assist with the system without necessarily fostering and adopting. There's respite care where you could babysit. There's CASA where you could become a court-appointed special advocate. There are ways that you can start somewhere. And then if you are so led to foster to adopt, then go that route. But I think that there's a stigma that's attached to the kids that are in the foster system, which also is a stigma that was created by systemic issues, which is what you kind of touched on, right? It's this perpetuation. The reality is some of the stigmas that are attached to these children could be stopped if they're placed in the right home. The realities could change because you can give them the home, the nurturing, the mental support, all of the things that they need to help to normalize their life and stabilize their life. And so I want to say that, but I also want to say that you can have a child and not know what's going to go on. Just because it came from you does not mean that everything is going to be all right and that they're going to have a wonderful career and that they're not going to mess up in life. Like, you don't know. You have no way of knowing. And so to me, the odds are the same. They really are. It's the nature versus nurture, I get, but I do feel like you can nurture some things into children. So.
Yeah, and I appreciate you speaking so much of that. As I was mentioning earlier, when I worked as a foster parent support specialist, I loved the work that I did because I saw how I was able to help these parents that were like, oh my goodness, how am I going to deal with this child? I was so not prepared for this. I was expecting this little baby that was going to be so easy to handle. But when I saw this little face, like you mentioned earlier, you see that face and you just know. But then that face grows up a few months or a year. There's some issues starting to come out. I don't know if I can handle this. And one thing that I continue to see kind of go back to what we were discussing is a lot of times you'll have people specifically who are in the church environment, and they will say, God put it in their heart to go out and serve. But then this has been occasions that I've seen where you would have a white family that would be like, but I don't want any black kids. But did God tell you to go serve only white kids, or did God tell you to go serve? So whenever I would see that family that would come through, I don't care whether you don't even tell us. We just want to know what are the issues that we need to be aware of. What is the necessity? And when you see that, because I have a foster parent, the last cohort of foster parents that I trained before I left Miami, it was a Spanish speaking class. So I had to, train them in Spanish. And there's this couple, and they adopted 2 little black girls. And they're a white Hispanic couple. And they adopted 2 little black girls. Well, they fostered and then they adopted them. But to see the life that these kids have, and these parents not trying to shun or hide them. Because a lot of times you'll see, I'm not going to say a lot of times, but sometimes you'll see, okay, I'll accept the kids, but when I go on vacation, they're going to have to stay in respite. When I go do this, they're going to have did you see any of that when you were in the system, or whenever you had kids that were coming or were introduced to you as a potential? Was there anything, or what were those initial thoughts and fears, so on and so forth, going through your mind before accepting?
Yeah. So first, let me say I love all children, and all children need homes. And I, by no means, what I'm about to say doesn't mean that white children don't need homes. However, when I entered the system, I did say that I want minority children. And so I think that there is a bias maybe for white people in particular, that you want someone that looks like you, and you want someone that maybe they don't want people to know they adopted, right? Is it right? Maybe not. But I also appreciate a white family that will say they would rather have a white kid and not get a black kid and then treat them differently. So I appreciate that much better. But I am unapologetically solid in why I chose, right, to foster and to adopt Black children. Yeah. I think that it is, people have to do self-work. That's what I'll say to answer your question. I think people have to do self-work before they enter into a decision to foster, to adopt. And they need to have conversations, just going back to DEI, about race, about what it means, about what it doesn't, about their own covert and overt racism or bias. Like, all of those things need to be a part of the discussion that you have when you decide what you're going to do and if you're going to foster, to adopt children that might not be the same race as you. And I think if you do decide to foster or adopt minority children, then you need to be prepared for what that means for them. So you need to be able to have conversations with them about what it means to be them in society, and how you'll help them and change the things that might come up for them, or work to change the things that might come up for them.
Wow.
That's beautiful. And I'm glad that you mentioned from the jump, you let it be known what type of children that you wanted to receive. And a lot of times when you're giving a training and you let it be known, are you okay with accepting XYZ? But then it's the last moment, 9:00 at night, these children need to be picked up at such and such, and you're the next person on our list. I appreciate the, just being real from the jump, because it causes, or it prevents, lots of confusion moving forward. Now, something that, and we are in this foster and adoptive care section for a while, I think is highly important. And some of you just mentioned, I had a gentleman, a white man, reached out to me on LinkedIn about giving trainings for white parents that have Black or biracial kids, because he didn't know what to do, how to approach it. So he reached out. And I think it's just so important to reach out, because what you don't know until you know. So reaching out for that assistance is so important. But
even when it comes to hair.
Yes. Yes. Oh my goodness. Yeah. That's a big one. That is, man, if you
people don't take it serious. They think it's a joke. It's like, you look at it and you're just like, no, water's not gonna cut it.
I've reached out. before. Like
spitting water and just thinking it's going to air dry is probably not going to work in your favor unless she got a little bit of something else in her blood. So yeah, just the hair alone. But us as Black women, I don't mean to cut Brian off, but just even Black students, or women or young boys or girls, our hair is our identity, a part of our identity. You start to see us express ourselves more through our hair. And if your hair looks terrible, I feel like it does affect how that child feels about themselves. And so that is, even if it's just a training on hair, I feel like it's important, because I forgot what show I was looking at the other day. This Black woman, she was being interviewed, and she was crying the whole time, like that she hated her hair. She hated that she couldn't do anything with her hair. She didn't know, she felt like it was just too nappy or whatever. And she was just in tears because she felt like when she stepped into the room, her hair was a part of her, who she is, which, we go places, people, that's the first thing they look at. They look at your hair, they look at, how you, but it's just another part of us. And so like Brian's saying, to someone that may be like, oh, it's just hair. But for us, we have expressed ourselves through our hair. And so, you're starting to see, especially the young generation, they're starting to embrace it more. Whereas I know that when I was younger, you didn't want to wear an afro. You didn't want your hair to be out nappy. You wanted your hair to be straight, or wore braids. And now you're starting to see a lot of young, especially Black, girls who are embracing their curls. They're embracing the big hair, and I think they're starting to understand more. My hair is a part of who I am, or expressing who I am, or even my culture or my background. So, it's definitely important that these parents are being educated on that, because that is important.
Skin
a lot.
too.
Skin
too. Mm-hmm. So out of 7 children total, 4 of the children that I either fostered or adopted came to me and they said that the children had eczema, and them children didn't have no eczema. They just wasn't lotion enough. Like, I'm not even lying. Like every single one, I was like,
because it's dry.
they're gonna be okay. You just gotta put lotion on them every day.
Right. That's that ginseng lotion. You need some shea butter, or something that's gonna not just dry up when you put it on. We need something a little more. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. So what is your conversation like with your children? Like when you initially brought them in, I'm sure it's new for everyone, but it may be natural. Like you said, your daughter felt like, hey, mom, like it was a natural, maybe that conversation wasn't needed at that time. But what was that initial conversation, or do you have initial conversations with your children when you bring them in on, like, what is that like? Is it awkward? Is it, for them? Is it awkward for you? Is it, what is that space like when they initially come into your home?
All of my children were fairly young when they first came into my home. My son was 2. He's now 6. My daughter was the oldest out of all of the placements I ever got, and she was 4 at the time. She'll be 7 in August. So it wasn't that we had initial conversations. We definitely let them know, like, we're mommy and daddy and you'll be here forever. You don't have to move again. Like, those were things that we would say. But there are conversations that we continue to have. I don't want them to ever feel like their journey to us is a secret or something that they have to be embarrassed about. I want them to know that their identity can still, we're going to make sure that we do anything we can to support whatever it is you feel you need to know who you are outside of us. But understand that as mom and dad, some moms get to carry their children, some dads get to help conceive a child, and others get to pick them. And you were chosen, and we wanted you, and we love you. And I tell them that all the time. There are books that we read with them. We answer questions, we have conversations. And I know that those questions will grow, right? Like as they get older, they're going to have more questions. For me, it's just, I want to be open. I want to understand that there are going to be times where this is going to be more difficult than it is right now. Like, I understand that they're going to have questions as to why, bio mommy and daddy weren't there. I'm sure they're going to have a lot of, concerns. And so I'm bracing myself because I also know that that's going to affect me. Like, I'm human.
Right. And that's what I was going to ask you, that journey.
Yeah. Therapy is important. and it's important for the children. It's also important for the parents. I think the therapy should be happening whether you adopt it or not, mental health advocacy. But for real, in this process and in this journey, it's been important to make sure that they have that support and that we do as well.
Yeah. So I know you and Brian, y'all are in this space, you understand it a little bit more. So I've always looked at it from the outside. But just that emotional attach. I mean, I look at the amount of students I've had that I was so attached to, even to this day. And so I can imagine bringing a child into your home and then, them having, I don't know how it works, but either them having to go, like you said, there was some that had to go back. I mean, that is emotionally, I would feel like, okay, wait, it would be hard for me to continue to build these relationships and then see them leave. And feeling like maybe you can't really do anything about it. Is there a certain system of adopting where it's like when you adopt a certain amount of children or a certain child, that child comes with like, okay, they don't go back, to their family? Or do you know when you're adopting who may have to go back to their family or may have that option? Is that part of the system, or how does that work?
Rachel,
yeah. So
before you answer that, kind of speak to how there's fostering and then there's also fostering to adopt, because some foster parents don't care to adopt. So kind of speak to that as well.
Yeah. So you can, when you become licensed, really decide how it is you want to enter, right, as a parent. So there are some people that don't want to adopt. They literally want to foster, and they understand that the placements are temporary and they will not be forever homes. There are people that have had children that have gone on to college and are grown, and then they decide to foster and open their home. And so in that situation, you are saying, I will be a rehabilitation center. Like, I will be the house that these children can come to, and either they're going to be reunified or they're going to go somewhere else to be adopted. If you enter as foster to adopt, then that means your end goal is to adopt. And so when children enter as foster children, there's always a possibility that their parents' rights will be terminated. And in the case that their parents' rights are terminated, then you may be considered. And it's still a maybe, because they have to determine if the house that they're in is where they think the child will be best. So there's that. And then you can also enter as just straight adoption. So you can say, I don't want to foster. I know that I want to adopt. I'll wait, because it usually is going to be a longer process. You have more of a chance of getting a child to adopt if you do foster to adopt, because you're able to kind of weigh in on children that might be adoptable already, as well as open your home for children that are open for foster care. So I see that I don't think she's on the screen anymore, so I don't know if she heard any of that. But
yeah, you had to step away, but I'll make sure that she replays this section.
Okay.
I love talking about this whole space, because this is where my career started. So I'll ask one more question in this space, and then we'll transition out. She spoke to the whole notion of attachment, and I've dealt with foster parents that were like up in arms, like, we had this kid for X amount of years, and their parents just weren't doing the right thing, and now you tell me just because they do this, they get a chance to have the kids back. That's just not right. And it sucks, because you see their point, but the system is the system, and we have to learn to navigate within it. Did you, whenever you're the one that did go back, had to go back, what were those initial emotions? Did you have any type of dialogue like that? Like, seriously, like, are you kidding me? Like, how was that for you?
So again, I've had 7 children altogether. 3 were adopted. 4 actually went back. Out of the 4, 3 of them, not saying that it wasn't difficult, 3 of them, I supported the decision. Like, I saw what the parents were doing. I saw that it was what was best for the child, and really actually believed that it was what was best for the child. The 4th one, I did not agree. And I felt as though the caseworker was not thorough. Well, that is also the child who was back in the system. So it's difficult, right? Like, I understand that as a foster parent, you sign up for the reality that these children may not stay with you, and you've got to be willing to detach. And I think that it is easier said than done. And sometimes I do think that people need to have a little bit more grace for foster families. However, you do have to enter with that expectation. Like, you have to know that what's best for the child is what needs to happen. And if they think that reunification is what's best, then they will move forward. Now, there are some cases, though, that you might have tangible evidence as to why that isn't fair. And you can bring that up and you can take it to court, but that costs money. So it just depends. I think every situation is different. Unfortunately, just like any profession, there are good caseworkers and there are bad ones. And that's the truth.
When you talk about there's money that goes into it, is there any type of like support financially that the government or the system provide to parents who have like battling with that court-wise, or you just pretty much it's on you your own personal money?
So if it is like you contesting or you taking something to court because you don't believe that the decision that the judge or, the caseworkers have come to was right, then you're paying for that. And again, I also am speaking from Texas. So I want to be clear that every state, you should check what policy is for your state. However, when there are court cases, so like adoption, that's covered by the state. So they're going to take care of you for obviously doing that goodwill and adopting the child. And so they end up sending like a voucher directly, at least here in Texas, that's how they do. Other finances, when you foster, you do get a stipend every month for the child. And then when you adopt in the state of Texas, it's just halved. So you don't get the same amount. You get half of what you used to get, but you get that for them until they're 18. And then in the state of Texas, kids can actually go to college for free. And it's for as far as they want to go. So I'm like telling my kids now, you want to be a doctor, don't you? Like,
lawyer, doctor, something, you can pay me back financially. Yeah. That's amazing.
To kind of wrap up in that section, that goes to privilege and understanding the different types of privilege. Whereas you dealing with kids in the foster care system, you can help them understand that you have the opportunity for this, but if you do X, Y, and Z, you put X, Y, and Z in place. Whereas lots of kids who may not have a parent that wasn't engaged in the training and understood that they could have that opportunity, those kids are going to age out the system and just fall off in the streets. So the fact that you can give them that insight to move forward, like I feel it's so beautiful, and it's the same way across the scale in life. When it comes to diversity, when it comes to equity, inclusion, whenever you have a certain level of influence in the space, be the voice. Don't just be silent. Don't just be, as was once mentioned to me, the black hole of information. If you know about it, pay it forward. So I love the fact that you mentioned that, because there may be someone watching who is a foster parent or adoptive parent, and they have a child that's about to become of age to go to school, and they're trying to figure out, how am I going to pay for this? Well, go to a state school, and you might not have to. That's the same applies in Florida.
Yeah. And 20,000 children nationally age out every year. So what that means is there are children that fall between the ages of 18 to 21, depending on the state determines what the age is to age out. And they were never placed with a family. So they're then aged out of the system, and they don't have a family to go back home to. If they go to college, they don't have a family to call their own. And so that's another reason why people are like, you could adopt a 17-year-old and then become their forever family.
Yeah. Wow. So when you're not, I'm sure you're a mother 24/9, but what do you do when you're not being a great mother, when you're not, doing all your other work? What's the other space that you like really enjoy doing? And I know I'm a little weird sometimes with myself. People are like, do you ever rest? It's like, I'm always thinking about what I can do. I'm always constantly emailing or texting Brian on like, I have an idea, or I that's my downtime. My mind is always thinking. But what is like your life outside of all your work that you're doing and being a mother? Like, what else do you do that you enjoy doing?
I love to cook, and I'm very good at it. I became plant-based about 8 months ago now. So I am not eating meat, but I still cook meat because I don't force that on my children. I obviously am a Delta, so I'm active within my sorority. I'm a social media influencer, so I know that still work, but I do a lot on Instagram and on Clubhouse, and it's still fun for me. I like to hike, so I do that. And this is something I don't think I've told too many people, but I'm actually really into astrology. So I read natal charts, and I think that it kind of even helps me, believe it or not, with like my work life, because I'll ask people real quick, like, when's your birthday? And I understand how to communicate with people based off of their sun sign and their moon sign and things that for some may be foreign. It is insane how accurate some of that stuff is. So.
I truly believe that as well. So any kind of work that you're doing right now, like, are you having any events or projects, or, first, how people can find you, number one, and, you gave a lot of great nuggets on, the system and foster care. What, if you could leave the audience with something, like, they need to know this, what would it be? First, let us know where they can find you, and then, leave us with something.
Okay. So you can find me at theonlyrachel.com, diversifiednow.org, at theonlyrachel on most social media. My favorites are Instagram and Clubhouse. You can find me on Facebook with that as well. And then I would like to leave the audience with, everyone has a circle of influence. Everyone can make an impact. Stop worrying about how big it is. Stop worrying about where to start, and just start. Whether it be to help the Black community, whether it be foster care to adoption, or whatever it is that's coming up for you that you're drawn to, start somewhere. When it comes to foster to adopt, it is Foster Care Awareness Month this month. So I'll say there are numerous things that you can do, whether it be donating time, donating money, sharing information on your social media feeds. There are all kinds of things that you could do. So start somewhere.
Wow. I mean, you're just, it's just been, I'm sure you've enlightened a lot of people on information, but it really blows my mind, because I didn't know I was as ignorant to, how the system is, and the type of things that go on. So you really have helped just bring ease and peace to me, to know that, hey, like, you can always contribute in this manner, and you can still be the mother that you want to be, and you can still, get all those feelings that we want to have. And so I truly appreciate the work that you do, and that you're continuing to do, because a lot of times people don't really see it, but they don't see it. It's a lot of work and emotions that go into it. And I'm so glad that you talk about the mental health side. I started going to a counselor when my brother passed, and I continued to go to her, but I realized that she's like my personal trainer, but for my mental. I told her, I don't want to just call you when I'm feeling down, or I've already had an episode, or I'm annoyed, or, and I just told her, even if I'm checking in with you to say I had a great 2 weeks, or maybe I didn't have a great 2 weeks, whatever it is, I just feel like we have to exercise that muscle, our muscle and our brain, it's just like our bodies. And so I appreciate you saying that, and sharing that journey with us, and being vulnerable, letting us know it's not an easy journey. But when has it ever been easy for us on anything? So I truly appreciate your work, sis, and I will continue to, contact you, and we're going to definitely be doing more work, and seeing how we can support you, and how you can support us as well. So I do appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And before I go, you have to tell me your sign.
I'm a Libra.
Okay.
September 30th. If you know something bad about me, you need to text me.
No, we'll talk about it later. I'm not going to break it down now, but he thinks he's going to get away without telling me his sign. What's your sign?
Look, yeah, I need to know. I am annoyed with you.
You don't know?
I said I'm a Scorpio.
Oh, that's why you were hiding. Got it. Okay. I'm a Capricorn.
We need everybody to put their birthdays and their signs in the chat. Let us know if we need to be talking to you or not. But I truly appreciate that. One of my mentors, she's really into that as well. So she started getting me connected with the menstrual cycle and the sun and this and that. And I was like, this is deep. I was like, oh my God. And then once I started to learn more, I was like, this stuff is for real, but some of it I ain't there yet. I'm like, I don't think I could do that. But, I do think it's important to be connected, and understand how the universe works and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, so you can hit me up and let me know, if there's anything I need to be. But again,
we'll have a
thank you
session.
so much. Yes, we will.
All
We
right.
definitely will. And I appreciate you. And stay beautiful inside and out. And we want to thank you for being a part of the Black Podcast. You have truly been a blessing.
Yes.
Thank you.
So we're going to put you in the backstage and we're going to close out, and then you be free to be a mama.
Okay.
Amazing. So it's such a blessing to meet all these wonderful women and men. But it really, truly educated me on this system, because we know about it, but you don't really know about it, because how often do people sit and talk about those experiences and how the system works? So I definitely appreciate her sharing her whole entire life with us, as far as all the areas of work that she does and how it all works together. It was awesome.
Yeah, and it speaks to the work that we do when it comes to identity, because the outside world is always going to try and identify you. They're always going to try and place labels on you. You should be this, you should be that. If you look like this, you should act like this. No, when you can wholeheartedly say, this is who I am, this is how I identify, you take it or leave it, that's when you have power. So I love the fact that she walks in that, but she also does her advocacy work in that space. So it's good stuff. And like you said, a lot of information around the child welfare system in general.
Because I didn't even know anything I watched a little bit of her video on YouTube earlier, but I didn't even know that was a part of a system where you can babysit. To even see, and it's almost like they're kind of easing you into doing the damn thing. But I feel like that's a good leeway for parents or women that are maybe considering it or maybe not considering it, but just to see how the system works and to see how it feels to have a child that maybe necessarily not you had, but just that you're adopted, even if it's for that minute. And then, gradually moving your way up. So I appreciate her saying that, because I definitely didn't know anything about that. And I think that is what I'm probably going to try.
I would actually, just based off of my experience, I would actually recommend people to try respite care before you go through the entire process of being a licensed foster parent, because I've seen those who the very first placement that they get, I can't handle this. Like, I'm done with this whole foster care and stuff. Y'all can take it. Like, I almost pulled out my last hair. And then I found those who were only respite, and they'd have a child.
Is that what happened to your hair?
No. Mine's happened biologically. My biological.
All right. I didn't know if you was just sharing a story with us.
Y'all little butts came along, and now my hair is gone. But yeah, and on the flip, some parents that went in as respite and they had the child for a weekend. Oh my goodness! Like, what do I need to do to become a full out foster parent? Definitely something that I would recommend.
Well, we'll definitely be having her back, and we'll be doing some more work with her within HSVA. I can't even say our business name. So if you could put the website up, Ryan, where people can find us and see how they can support us, and also our guests. So make sure you also reach out to the Only Rachel and see how you can contribute and help to her work as well. But you can find all that information on wearehsba.com. And you will find out who's our next guest, who's our past guest, our present guest, and also find out how you can help to contribute to the Black community within the educational system, which in the social work. You can look at theonlyrachel.com, and she'll have some more information there. And she can she can educate you on some things, and she sure did it for me. So please make sure you reach out and support her. You can find her also on Instagram on The Only Rachel. And until next time, we'll be here next Thursday at 4 p.m. Central Time. So make sure you are live and share this video. If you don't share this video, you're not contributing. So I'm just letting you know right now. So you need to go ahead and share so that others can also get this information that she shared with us today.
Yes, indeed. So as she said, next time, same place, same time next week. Y'all have a good one. Take care.